Welcome to the Piece of Me podcast. This is your space for all things peace, positivity, and finding balance to live your best life. Life gets busy, and at times it's messy. I'm here to help you clean things up and put peace back in its place. I'll share tips, ideas, interviews, mindset shifts, and fresh perspectives to help you along the way. Hi friends, it's Leigh. If you're new here, welcome. And if you are not new, then welcome back and thanks for coming back to the podcast. Last week on the show, Tess from CompletelyGolden joined the podcast to share how she manifested a man and found love. She also talked about the list of what she was looking for in a partner and how she had to be willing and flexible to change what was on that list to find her partner. Now, the word manifest has become a little bit overused and even incorrectly spoken. In last week's episode, she talks about how to actually manifest the things that you want to come to you. She also talked about sound healing, her personal illness that led to becoming a sound healer, hypnosis, mirror work, and much more. Now, she's back on the podcast today to talk about creating and enforcing boundaries, being an only child, singing bowls, and what a gong's energy frequency can do for your body. She'll talk about the benefits of sound baths and when you're experiencing an unhealthy one. She also touches on not dyeing her hair anymore and how she's become so confident to let her gray hair be, even at 36 years old. And spoiler alert, she's gorgeous and makes gray hair look so good. Now, lastly, she'll share a few tips, if this style interests you, on simple steps that you can take to start your own healing journey. Now, to get more of Tess, you can find her on Instagram at CompletelyGolden, and while you're there, give a follow to the Piece of Me podcast. Let's take a listen.
So, the other side of this coin is I was preparing to leave for 6 weeks to do a tour, a sound healing tour. My first stop was to go to Costa Rica. I was hired to facilitate a week-long women's retreat doing sound healing in Costa Rica. And then I was going to fly to the East Coast, do my tour that I mentioned earlier, and then come back home. And I'm preparing for all of this. I'm all packed. I left on July 5th. It's now July 4th. And I get a notification that my bank account has been hacked. They've taken all of my money, and the bank flagged this as fraud and has since frozen my account and canceled all of my cards. It's a bank holiday, so I can't talk to anyone. And I'm literally getting on a plane at 5 a.m. the following morning to go to a foreign country, now with no access to money whatsoever. This has been an ongoing test. Again, this is a test. How am I going to react in this situation? It's a test not in, here's an offering of a physical item, but a test of how are you going to respond? Are you going to stay safe and secure and know that you can navigate the world and that you're supported? Or are you going to freak out, go into fear mode, start dog paddling, trying to control everything? I stayed in the safety. I actually laughed. I was like, well, of course this would happen. This is telling me that something big is happening. It's asking me if I'm going to stay in my worth. So I am going to stay in my worth. There's nothing I can do in this situation. The bank is closed. I'm leaving at 5 a.m. before the bank's open, going to another country. I'll deal with it when I get there. What can I do right now? Okay, I have a friend. Can I borrow $300 in cash and I'll pay you back as soon as this is all figured out? Great. Thank you so much. I understand not everybody has those luxuries or that ability, but everyone has their own version of a solution. So that happens. I'm spending the day with a friend, hanging out by the pool. And one of my deal breakers for a man, I didn't have many, but one of them was that they could not have previous children. I have dated people in the past that had children from other marriages, and I would get attached to the child. The other partner was always an issue. And I just didn't want to deal with that again. And I was expressing this to my friend, and she kind of just looked at me and she was like, I don't know. I think you're going to meet someone and they'll have a kid and you're just not going to care. And I was like, I don't know. We'll see. But it opened up a tiny little door for me, which is important. And I leave hanging out with that friend and I get home. I wake up. I have to leave at 5 a.m. for my flight. And it's maybe midnight now. And I wake up with food poisoning. My first experience with food poisoning to the nth degree. Everything that I've ever heard about what food poisoning is, I'm experiencing. And again, I'm like, okay, something big is coming. I don't know what it is, but my bank account was hacked. Now I'm having an actual physical purging of everything that's inside of me. And whenever we have any ailments or sicknesses that include purging, whether it's a simple sneeze or the extreme like food poisoning, when you are releasing the things inside of you, your body is making space so that you can receive what's next. It's letting go of all of the past toxins and traumas and emotions and even literally bacteria or whatever is not in alignment of your highest good so that you can receive that. So I am going through it this eve before I leave. And I am aware that like, how am I going to fly while I feel like this? I hope this stops by the time I have to get on the plane. Luckily it did. It was okay. I also know myself and how I travel. So I had booked an extra day before I had to be at the retreat. So I get to Costa Rica. I make the 3-hour trek down the dirt, rugged roads. I get to the hostel. I was staying in a hostel before the resort. And I just slept. I just slept the whole day. I recovered. The next day, we're meeting for the retreat. It's a group of 16 women. And our first activity is a waterfall hike. We rally the group. Everyone's so excited. They're all getting to know each other. Everyone's coming from all different places all over the country, the United States. We're in a new country. Most of them, it's their first time ever in Costa Rica, including me. And we get on the buses. We drive to the waterfall. And I see, as we're parking, I see this man through the window. And I got that same sensation as I did when I saw the singing bowls. It was like everything lit up inside of me, this sense of remembering. I don't know who he is. There are a lot of people around this waterfall entrance. I mean, he could be any person. And we all get off the bus, and it's a group of 16 gringos, American women in a group getting ready for this waterfall hike. And this man that I had seen walks straight over to me. And from that moment, we were inseparable. We spent the entire waterfall hike together. All of the other women could have cared less about this guided hike. They were all getting to know each other and chatting. And so it was just me and him. His name is Rio. And he was giving me a tour of the jungle, of this tree and this plant and the medicinal uses of this plant and this monkey and his ability to replicate the sound of that monkey, or he'd find a feather and this feather is from this bird. Within the first 3 minutes, he had picked up a plumeria flower and put it behind my ear. And it felt like magnets. It felt like we were two magnets that just came together. And at the end of the hike, we're walking back. We're showing each other pictures of our animals. And we make a date for the next day. He wanted to do a sound healing session. He had heard about sound healing, but had not had the opportunity, and then wanted to take me for lunch. I spent that entire week with him on all of my free time from the retreat. All of the women that were part of the retreat knew him and were so excited and just totally cheering us on. And it was really fun to go on a date and then come back and share everything with everyone, and just feeling that support and excitement. And really realizing that, wow, this is him. This is the man that I've been wanting. And my mom would always say to me, I know that you feel frustrated right now, but when you meet him, it will all make sense why you had to wait until the time you did. And that it was so exactly true. And even that saying that everyone says of like, when you know, and it'll just be easy. I heard that so many times, but I just couldn't conceptualize it until now when I actually felt it. So we have this beautiful week. It's very much like, wow, this is my manifestation. I have to leave now and go on this tour for a month in New York with a lot of scheduled gigs, and just how do we do this? He lives in Costa Rica. He owns, so this is actually a very fun part of the story, is that he owns the tour company. He does not lead tours at all. But this crazy series of events had happened that morning that all of the guide that was scheduled was sick. He got a replacement guide. That guide got a flat tire on the way and wasn't going to make it on time. All of these things that made he had to be there. And that he said that to me. He was so frustrated when he got there because that's not what he does. But he saw me get off the bus and he knew exactly that that's why he was there. So we're doing all the long distance. I have been a very anxious attachment person and doing a lot of work to shift into that secure attachment. He is a very secure attachment person. So he's extremely communicative, very expressive with his feelings, his desires, what he wants for us. And that has been helpful for me, but I still am having to work through all of that. And I can take a break so that I'm not just talking ad nauseum, but this is the part that I think is very important for people, that even when you get the manifestation, there's still a lot of tending to all of those parts of your past that are still looping in the subconscious to make sure that you can even receive the manifestation.
So I have two questions that I think, as the listeners have heard your story, are maybe thinking about in their own heads. So the first one is he taller than 5'11"? And two, does he have kids?
So he is not. He is, I don't know his exact height, but I would say he's 5'7", 5'8". I'm 5'4". And he presents very big. He has and people have told me that, even I've heard a lot of times when I meet people that have followed me on Instagram and then meet me in person, they're like, oh, you're a lot smaller than I thought you are. He just presents as a very big man. His stature, his entire physical self is every single thing that I've ever written on a manifestation list that I wanted, aside from the height. But what it does hit is that feeling. I feel so safe. I get that I feel smaller and feminine to be held by him sensation. And he also kind of is like a chameleon in that I've seen him stand next to taller guys and he looks taller, like he looks as tall as them, but then he'll be with smaller guys or near me and he appears smaller. So it's I haven't quite figured out how he does that, but on our first date, he took me to this very, very fancy rooftop restaurant with a 365-degree view of the ocean and the jungle, and it was just incredible. And he shared that he has a daughter and that she, at the time, was living with her mom in Hawaii since they had the divorce, and that he sees her once or twice a year for a stretch of time. But that other than that, he's mostly on his own and just running his business in Costa Rica. For me, when he told me that, it was exactly like my friend had said. I did not care at all. It was just like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. I will say that this is then where the compromise piece comes in, is after my 4-week tour of the East Coast, he flew me back to Costa Rica so that we could continue to spend time together. So he flew me back. I stayed there for a week with him, and this time I was with him rather than at a resort and going to meet him for dates. All of this is like a hyper speed dating process. But 2 days before I arrived, his daughter's mom returned to Costa Rica and moved her back and enrolled her in school.
Oh, wow.
So now they are there. And she was there with me while I was there that whole week. And I got to meet her, and she's wonderful. And seeing him with her is wonderful. But it is that little piece of compromise of, okay, this initially was a deal breaker for me. When he first told me, it was maybe like the best scenario that I could think of if he were to have a kid. And now that's out the window, and it's the opposite situation. Is this still worth it for me? Is he still showing up? Is he still making time for me? Is he able to balance all of this? Do I enjoy being in that dynamic? All of that was a yes. And so I'm happy for that compromise. And I can see how it even would create something even bigger and more beautiful. So I'm there for that week. We have an amazing time. We also have what I call like 2 little splinters that are very normal, of just one was instigated by me, one was instigated by him. But the difference that I have never experienced before was a reparative scenario where we had these splinters. They were very minor, but we talked about them and we expressed our needs, we expressed our perspective, and we repaired it. And then I finally felt that sensation of, oh, I feel even safer now. I trust you even more now. Whereas in the past, if that happened, it would create a chasm that we could never bridge to again. So now I'm back in Los Angeles. We've been apart now a week, and I have been dealing so much with anxiety of all the scenarios. How is this going to work? When am I going to move there? How am I going to move there logistically? How much is my car worth? What furniture items am I going to sell? If I want to keep furniture items, how do I ship them there? Is this real? Have I made all of this up? Am I moving too fast? What if he turns out to be something other than he's presenting? All of the crazy, anxious things that my very valid and wounded inner child is experiencing because of my past, because of my dad leaving, because of different scenarios that I have experienced. So I am utilizing the To Be Magnetic, those hypnosis, and it's amazing how quick I will get a resolution. So there was, for an example, he is taking a weekend with his daughter right now. And last night he had sent a voice note that he's very much there with her and that he will reach out at some point. That was his quote. To someone who has an anxious attachment, that is like a bomb. So last night I was spiraling. I was constantly re-listening to the message, picking up on any like tonal change in his voice, trying to predict what that meant, aware, having that sense of observation about myself. Okay, I know that this is perhaps just an anxious response. Journaling, I talked to some friends about it. This morning I woke up, I was still very anxious. And so I thought, okay, what can I do? What situation is feeling unnerved in me that needs some attention? And I did identify that it is that inner child and a feeling around home and safety. And so I did a hypnosis that is specifically within the inner child workshop called Home. I did that. I had a lot of clarity come through. And as soon as I ended that meditation, he sent another voice note saying, I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about you, but I have to be and want to be very focused on my daughter right now. So I hope that you're not misunderstanding what I said yesterday, but I'm thinking about you and I will call you soon.
Wow.
And that was like the direct emotional response that I was looking for, of just that reassurance, that even him saying, I hope you're not misunderstanding this, which I hadn't communicated to him at all, that I was in that space, even though I was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a direct manifestation. I'm doing the work for myself, and then the universe sends forward this little gift. So there's that.
And, you know, a couple things you mentioned, I think are so important for the listeners to really catch here is, you know, you could have created this list, which we all have done it, you know, of what this person looks like that you hope to find out there. And they have all these physical attributes, or maybe they make a certain income or work in a certain industry. Maybe don't have kids, because I'm raising my hand over here. I said the same exact things. But then you're not open to, you know, there's so many people that are wonderful people who could be a great fit for you. But if you're not open to that because you're only looking for somebody who's checking your list, you could miss out. So here you have this amazing guy who you have this incredible connection with. And, you know, maybe he's on a modified list. And it's funny when you mentioned the children, because I did the same thing. I said, I'm not going to date a guy with kids. And then I meet the most amazing man who has 2 children. And here I am. So as you're saying this, I'm like nodding along, even though the listeners can't see us, but everything you're saying, I'm like, yep, I'm with you. So there's so much truth to that. And I love that you shared that, you know, just because the manifestation came to life, the work wasn't done. There's still further work that needs to be done. And you're still working through that. Like the fact that you guys do live in 2 very, you know, faraway places. And now you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we navigate this now? You know, who's moving where, and when do we make that happen? And what are the next steps? And everything you brought up, I think, you know, I feel like that's probably very natural to wonder those things of, you know, can I sell my things, and what's the time frame that we're working on? But, you know, you feel that connection, and I just, everything you were saying, it hit home for me too. So let's talk a little bit, we're going to kind of shift gears just slightly here and talk a little bit about boundaries. This is something that we talked a little bit about offline, but just to kind of talk about, you know, when it comes to life, and the word boundary gets used a lot too, just like I feel like the word manifest does. So how do we create boundaries in life, and how do we enforce them? Because that seems to be the hard part, is we can say, nope, this is what I'm going to accept or tolerate, but then enforcing them always kind of seems to be something else. So is that anything you can kind of shed light on?
So boundaries, simply put, are a way for us to help other people understand how we want to be treated. When we communicate a boundary, we're sharing with another person how we want to be treated. You first need to understand how you want to be treated. And a lot of us are putting up what we think are boundaries, but are actually walls or resistance to keep ourselves safe because of our past traumas, our upbringing, the things that we saw happening around us that we feel we need to shield ourselves from. We might even have quote unquote boundaries that maybe your mom had for herself that we think are just inherent for all people, but actually that's not true. A really great example of this is my mom grew up in a home with 6 kids, and she has really strived to have a solitary life as an adult. She loves being alone. She loves spending her time in her home, doing her own thing, having her freedom. I grew up as an only child, and I do not like being alone. I want connection. I want community. I want people around. But I was raised, and my energetic frequency was tuned to be alone. And so oftentimes I will find myself in an isolated space and feeling like, oh, I don't want to be alone. I feel so alone, but not knowing how to bridge that gap with other people. And it's because I have been sending out this energetic boundary. It's not a real conscious boundary, but a boundary with other people in my life because I feel that I need to be alone because that's what I saw my mom doing. But that's not a boundary for me. So I am actively trying to take down that wall and change that energetic blueprint by actively reaching out to people and saying, hey, let's go for a walk, or let's meet up for lunch, or hey, I'm thinking about you. Are you free for a phone call? Whatever it is where, and I have to check myself that I'm not doing this out of desperation. I'm not doing it because I feel desperate that I need someone, and without them, I am either small or worthless or whatever. I am still confident and secure in myself, and I want to share that with someone else. So that is an example of a false boundary and an unspoken energetic boundary. We can very consciously, once you've done a lot of this foundational work of understanding your own needs and increasing that belief in your self-worth, you will become more and more clear about what it is that you will and will not accept within your life. And this could be, what's coming to mind actually is a scenario about the gray hair. I'm 36. I'm still on the younger spectrum of having gray hair, but I started to go gray, I would say, when I was 25. So I've had about 10 years of that. And only in that whole stretch of 10 years, only one person has ever said anything even remotely negative about my gray hair. And it was at the very beginning. And I set that boundary immediately. It was a woman who was older than me, who always, similar to my mom, always was getting her hair colored. Never would you see her with even a millimeter of gray hair coming through. And she said to me in, I think what she felt was a very kind way, it essentially was, but do you think you'll ever color your grays? They're really starting to come in. And I just very strongly and felt in that core. And I was just like, of course I've thought about it, but it's really not authentic to me. So I feel confident with my gray hair. Never since then has anyone ever said anything like that to me, because one, I stated a verbal boundary, but that also instated an energetic boundary to the world. So I am not susceptible to receive that kind of criticism, even if it was nicely put. And now I only receive the opposite, like I shared, people coming to me and saying, wow, it's so amazing that you have gray hair. Wow, it's so sexy to see a woman with gray hair. So when you have that very clear frequency going on, you can express that easily. What people, I think, need to understand is the intention behind how you're communicating this boundary. You don't ever need to be forceful in setting a boundary, because then that's leaning more to putting up a wall, to putting a resistance. And we only would do that in situations where we actually feel insecure and unsafe underneath it. And so then that boundary is more likely than not going to be listened to. If you're insecure and feeling unsafe and having to put up a wall, whoever's receiving that is going to push through. They're going to push back against that wall. You need to cultivate that calmness, that deep trust and understanding of just, I'm very clear. This is my boundary. This is how I feel about this. This is how I would like to be interacted with. And then there is no question. There's no wiggle room, because we're all relating to each other through that unseen, unspoken frequency. If mine is very clear, that's it. There is no argument about it. Mm-hmm. If somebody might have a question about it, that's wonderful. I love ask the questions, and I'll explain even deeper why I feel confident in this.
Mm-hmm. I love that. No, that's great. Now I have a question that I wasn't planning on asking you, but I noticed behind you, and the listeners can't see us right now, but is it a gong that's behind you? Now, that is so cool. And what do you do with that?
So the gong is part of my sound healing. I have a lot of different instruments, and the gong came to me, I would say it was at the very beginning of this year of 2023, the beginning of January. And I just felt it in my body. It was like a calling to me. So I had been working with the singing bowls on their own for about 9 months at that point, and this gong energy just kept coming into my awareness. And the gong is actually a lot more affordable than the singing bowls. The bowls that I use are like the top grade. Each bowl is about $2,000. And
Wow.
so it takes a lot for me. I don't have abundant financial whatever. So to buy a new bowl takes a lot of effort. And I'm at this space now where I have 3 bowls. And so it wouldn't be wise for me to buy one more bowl. I would need 2 bowls to have the optimal number of permutation of note outcomes. That's more in like the music theory space, but then that means I would have to invest $4,000, which makes it even harder. So again, there's my money story. That money is difficult to attain. So the gong energy was coming in. It's a very different energy than the singing bowls, but it also was about $700 for the gong and the stand and the mallets. So that was an easier financial investment for me to do. And it felt like a very interesting direction to take my sound healing in. As we all are very individual people, each sound healer is very different. And so for anyone who's listening, if you've had a sound bath that you really loved, that's great. And try other sound healers. If you've had a sound bath that you didn't like, I'm sorry. And that totally can happen. I've received sound baths that I had to leave from because I didn't like them so much. But still try a different sound healer. We are all different. We all have our own gifts and our own instruments and the ways that we play them. But the gong is made of brass, and that makes it a fire element instrument. And fire instruments are meant to clear and cleanse the body. So this energy is penetrating your body at a cellular level. It's creating a lot of movement and allowing your cells to release viruses, toxins, mold, bacteria, stored emotion, all of those things that are being held within the cellular structure and the cellular memory. So often when I'm playing, I get even physically very hot. My body will feel hot while I'm playing it. But for those that you're only listening to the audio, the pattern on my gong is a yin yang symbol. And this is the two opposing forces. There is the dark side and there is the light side. There is the masculine side, the feminine side, not about gender, it's just about energy. And I really, if you cannot tell, I love the subconscious space. The subconscious is often talked about as the void space. This is where everything and nothing exist all together. And that is what the yin and yang symbolize. It is everything and nothing. It's always those opposites. And it's a very powerful and intense sound and instrument that can often feel confrontational or overwhelming to the mind. And it can help you shift into the subconscious space easier. It's almost like a push rather than your own mind having to navigate to get into that space. So I use it within my sound healing to help people explore their own depths, to explore that shadow space, the darker aspects that might feel uncomfortable for people, but showing them that, hey, listen, I'm here. I've done a lot of this work. I can even hold you in this space so that you feel safe. I can help you navigate it. And once you get comfortable in this space, then that's when you see that everything exists. At first, it feels like nothing exists, but then everything does. And that's where we manifest from.
Thank you for that. And you
Yeah.
mentioned the sound bath. So I want to go back to that because you've said before that there are some people out of integrity in the sound healing community. So And you mentioned that before too with the sound bath, where you've experienced a sound bath that you had to leave from. I don't know if those two are connected or not, but can you tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe some of the benefits of sound baths?
Sure. I'll start with the benefits. The sound healing is amazing. I mean, I had my own miraculous healing from sound. I've had many clients that have had similar outcomes with sound. There, you can easily find on YouTube. Even there are scientists that are working with sound healers to cure cancer, to show how the cells are able to reproduce just within a 1 hour session of a sound bath. Your cells are brand new. There's a lot of benefits. What's happening is the sound frequency is penetrating the body, connecting with you at a cellular level, as I mentioned, and the frequency or the resonance, a resonance is a repeating frequency wave or a sine wave, and this is tuned to perfect harmony. Naturally, our cells vibrate in a perfect harmonic state. However, our daily lives are constantly throwing stressors at us. I mean, at this point, I feel like everyone has heard of our adrenals are overtaxed and we have too much cortisol in our bodies and we're constantly in that fight or flight state. By coming to sound healing, it forces our body to shift into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest, digest, stay, and play state where you feel very safe in the present moment. And it is entraining, this is a vocab word in the sound healing world, it is entraining yourselves to vibrate in tandem with their harmonic rate. So throughout the day, you might wake up feeling very rested, but then as you're on your way to work, you're in traffic or there's an ambulance that goes by that's really loud, and then you have a disagreement with your boss or whatever the little things are. Your kids are crying because the X, Y, and Z. All of those little things, not even talking about maybe physical ailments and illnesses that we have underlying, are all causing your cells to vibrate in disharmony or dis-ease. And over prolonged time of dis-ease becomes disease. So when your cells are vibrating out of that harmony, it leads to actual disease. When we allow them to sync or to be entrained to a harmonic frequency through sound healing, it again renews the cells. After an hour sound bath, there's a video on YouTube where they did a blood sample of a woman, regular normal health woman, of her cells. About 60% of her cells had the presence of bacteria, viruses, mold, normal everyday toxins. They showed presence of dehydration. The cells were misshapen. They were also very lazy and kind of clumped together, creating that like stagnant or slow flowing blood, or also known as a slow qi if you're interested in Chinese medicine. After the hour sound bath, they did a blood sample and 90% of her cells were revitalized, were fully plump, fully hydrated, and had vibrated at such a speed that they were able to release the viruses, bacteria, mold, toxins into the bloodstream. And once those are released into the bloodstream, then we can assist our body with water, with fiber, allowing all of that to be cleared through and eliminated. So not only is that happening within the body, but then the sound, the frequency is helping to sync the left and the right sides, the hemispheres of your brain. And when that happens, it is increasing memory, cognitive performance of all kinds. You feel more productive. You are able to have more ideas and create this prolonged, sustained energy and attention. It narrows your focus. So there's a lot of things that are happening, as well as building and strengthening those neural pathways that I keep talking about through this episode. When you're inputting these new neural pathways, you need to practice them. And through this syncing of the left and the right hemispheres, they're able to continue to be strengthened.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now,
Those are the benefits, but then the integrity piece. This integrity piece goes for any area that people work in or that they live through their lives in. It's not just in sound healing. I've seen it in the yoga space, or even a personal trainer, or a chef, or even a primary care doctor, or a stock trading person. I mean, integrity is a human experience, and you have to be the one that is in charge of your own integrity. In the sound healing space, as well as all of those others, but I'll stay focused. What I'm finding is that people are trying to be everything. They're exhibiting people-pleasing tendencies. They're trying to be everything for everyone. And I meet all the time people that say, oh yeah, I'm a sound healer too, but I also teach yoga, and I also do Reiki, and I'm also a breathwork facilitator, and I also lead cacao ceremony, and I also make my own tinctures and herbal remedies, and I'm also an herbalist, and all of those things, and the list can go on. All of those things on their own are an individual, very deep, full of so much information and science and wisdom that they could be their own full-time career. When you have this overarching, oh, I do 12 plus things, you cannot sink deeper into each of them. So again, you're focusing on that surface level, the makeup, the dyeing, the hair. It's all surface, the affirmations, the vision board. It's not going deeper. I have been studying sound healing on its own. I am a sound healer. When I hear other people say, oh, I'm also a sound healer, after they've been talking about all these other things, I cannot take them seriously. There are even certain elements of being a sound healer, certain words or knowing our forefathers that really set up the sound healing space, that created the certain instruments or the lineage, the history. And if someone doesn't know those things, then that is another indicator. And I'm just seeing more and more people that they play instruments. They know how to move a mallet around the outside of a singing bowl, but that does not make them a sound healer. And so I've started to say and urge people to put the healer back into sound healing, because it's so easy to play these instruments. Any person can play them. At the end of my sessions, when I do workshops, I often will invite people, if anyone wants to try them. If I'm seeing people are very interested and they're coming up and asking questions, I'll say, oh, well, would you like to try it? They can play it in less than 10 seconds. It's very easy. It is the intention behind. I am the conductor. I am the facilitator of this energy that the singing bowls are producing. And it is all very scientific. And if you don't know what it is that you're doing, what the frequency is that you're putting out, it can be detrimental to people. And so, yes, I've been in sound baths where the facilitator is not understanding the scientific physiology of what they're doing, and how by them playing these two specific notes, it's creating a binaural beat, which, yes, can be used purposefully, but if used without that knowledge, can cause seizures in many people. And there are many nuanced things like that where very easily people give themselves away that they don't know what they're doing. So in this time where everyone can be anything, unfortunately, there is no regulation within the sound healing community. They're like a yoga certification. You have to have a certain number of hours. There is not that yet in the sound healing community. So anyone can say that they're a sound healer. That we as the receiver have to cultivate our own discernment you have to be able to tune into the person's frequency and energy and intention and understand if that's right for you. You also have to leave behind any of your own personal people-pleasing tendencies. Like I said, have left sound baths. I'm not going to sit there and put myself through an uncomfortable situation that might be damaging to my cellular structure because I don't want to upset the facilitator. I leave. I need to take care of myself. So the discernment and that integrity on your own side is really important. So I do train sound healers, but I train them over 6 weeks, and it's a very intensive, where a lot of sound healers are going through weekend long programs and then are going out into the community to teach. I've been training for over a year. I'm always reading books. I'm always working with new mentors. I'm going to a gong workshop on Monday. I'm always learning so that I can create and cultivate and craft what I'm offering even that much more deeply.
Now, you said that it's very interesting that a couple beats together could even, you mentioned the stroke, which is scary and alarming. How would somebody know if they are in a sound bath? How would they know if something isn't right? Is it just kind of intuition?
Yes. So you will feel if something isn't right. Your body will tell you, because a sound bath is so much in the body, your body will let you know. If you are clenching your jaw, if you get a headache, if you feel tightness in your chest, in your belly, if your breathing is feeling erratic or you can't take a deep breath, there might be two things going on in that situation. It might be what I'm speaking of, where the facilitator just is not capable of holding the space required. Or the alternative is that you might be moving through your own discomfort. It might be bringing up thoughts, memories, emotions from your past that are uncomfortable for you, that it's actually very helpful for you to move through them in that moment. So you have to be able to cultivate that discernment to think, okay, is anything specific coming to mind right now that actually this discomfort is, I just need to sit with this memory and work through it? Or do I feel totally fine and nothing really is going on, but my body is reacting? Then I need to leave.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So for our final question, and your time today has been, the listeners are absolutely going to appreciate all the information you've shared with us and your personal stories. Just so thank you so much for being here. For some people, they might want to embrace a little bit more of kind of the lifestyle that you're living, whether it's with what they eat or how they spend their time or reflection and the healing. But maybe life is pulling them in a different direction at the same time. So how do they find that balance? But where do they really start? If they're really not ready, to be completely engulfed in the life of maybe sound healing, but they want to start somewhere. Where do they go?
Well, I'll say that whoever's listening, if you've made it all the way through this episode and you are still interested, that is the number one indicator that you are interested in any part of this type of lifestyle. And so perhaps you're not taking on any of those aspects within your life, but there's a part of you that is recognizing that in me. And that is what I've called before the expander. So I am expanding you to let you know that part of your authenticity is to align more with this. With that being said, you have to go at your own pace, kind of like I was talking about with the embodiment blueprint, where you are making micro adjustments to your lifestyle. You do not want to do a total overhaul, because that's more the energy of what a lot of people go through when they do New Year's resolutions. It's like they change and they go from 0 to 100 in a day. And I think the statistic is 90% of people drop their resolution within 3 weeks. So that's not what we're looking for. I don't want you to be pushing past that point of resistance. You need to stay in that space just prior to feeling resistance. That is when you're going to be able to make the most effective change. It's not to say that you're staying where you are. You're still putting forward new growth and changes, but changes that feel comfortable until they're fully integrated. And then you take the next micro step. So my whole life might seem overwhelming to some people. I eat very healthy. I only eat organic food. I eat very minimally packaged food. I have studied nutrition, so I understand what's happening with the food in my body. I do not eat any forms of sugar aside from honey and fruit sugar. So that eliminates a lot of options for me. I also do not eat any gluten, which also eliminates a lot for me. And I do not eat any gluten-free alternative things. So like a gluten-free bread that is filled with binders and fillers to mimic the quality of bread. No. I do not utilize any substances. I don't drink alcohol. I don't use drugs. I don't smoke cigarettes. I am an extremely sensitive person. I'm working with energy, literally. So my energy has to be as clear as possible. And I feel that all of us are very sensitive people, but the more that you desensitize yourself, the more you're able to stay in that space. The more sensitive you allow yourself to become, the more sensitive you are. If I now have something, let's say it's by mistake or even on purpose, it's like, oh, I haven't eaten sugar in a while. I think having this panna cotta because I'm out at a fancy dinner with my friend is going to be fine. I eat it. The next day, I am totally sick with a cold. It's like I have no wiggle room within my sensitivity. So that is very off-putting to a lot of people because they don't want to have to be so rigid. But I don't want to feel numb anymore. And so I would rather feel sensitive than feel numb. So start implementing wherever you feel called. If it's that you want to start doing a 3-minute meditation every day, that's what I recommend to people. You don't really need more than that. Just sit in silence, put a timer on your phone for 3 minutes and just observe. Notice if you get distracted, if you start thinking about your shopping list, and then bring yourself back to the present moment. And then eventually you'll wander again and you bring yourself back. That's the practice of meditation. If you want to stop using chemicals in your shampoos or your makeup, that's a very easy fix to swap out. And then all of those things can begin to build upon each other. And from there, the sky's the limit. I mean, then you can begin to explore other modalities. You can even begin to bring in more holistic medicinal practices. I go to my primary doctors for the basic care, but for any other things that pop up, I'm going to Chinese medicine doctors, to an acupuncturist. I'm visiting the infrared sauna. I'm utilizing sound healing. I'm working with a hypnotherapist in a live session to work through something that I think is connected to a chronic Epstein-Barr virus issue, but is actually rooted in my childhood. So once you get through that initial change that feels uncomfortable, it's a lot easier to open up and expand.
And those are a lot of great, like you said, there's smaller steps and some bigger steps in that process. So if somebody needs to start somewhere, they can kind of pick and choose what feels right to them. So that's very helpful. So I guess last, is there anything else you just like to share with the listeners today on the podcast, or any final words?
Let's see what can come through. Really, it's that discernment of who you are, and that the time. A lot of people have an excuse that they have no time to do all of this, but we all have the time that we give ourselves. There are always places that you can shift out of less. I have a friend that has 2 young boys, and she's always saying that she doesn't have time to do this kind of thing, even though she's always curious and asking me questions about it. But when it comes to doing it herself, oh, I don't have time for that. But then I'll see her scrolling on her phone for an hour before she goes to bed. So why do you think that scrolling on your phone for an hour is more valuable than doing a 20-minute meditation to just learn about yourself a little bit more? So just paying attention to those things.
That's great advice. That is great advice. Well, Tess, thank you so much for being with us on the Piece of Me podcast. Everything you shared, I know is going to be very valuable to the listeners. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And if anyone wants to connect, I love connecting. So you can feel free to reach out and literally say hello or send an email or a message online. But my business is Completely Golden. And I'm on Instagram at Completely Golden. My website is CompletelyGolden.com. For anyone who's interested in that 2B magnetic program that I've been talking about, you can get, it's 15% off. It's already very affordable. It's less than $1 a day. But my code, which is Tess, which is my first name, TESS, is 15% off of that. So, reach out if you have questions about that or questions about anything else. I would love to connect with you.
Awesome. And I will link Tess's information in the show notes below so that everybody can connect with her and get all the wonderful things that she has to offer. So Tess, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Lexy. Thank you, everybody.
Before you go, I need your help. If you're listening to this show on Apple Podcasts, scroll all the way down and give the Piece of Me podcast a positive rating and review. You can also support the podcast by subscribing to this show on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, or wherever you listen. To stay connected, follow the Piece of Me podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and at the website pieceofmepodcast.com.